When you stay silent, something sacred begins to happen that most people never notice. In a world that celebrates noise, constant talking, opinions, and arguments, silence has become a lost art. But silence is where God does his deepest work. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of stillness, the stillness that allows God to speak. When you withdraw from the noise of comparison, gossip, validation, and chaos, you open your spirit to the whisper of God. That whisper is not loud because God doesn't compete with noise. He waits for you to quiet down enough to recognize his presence. Most people think transformation happens on the outside and through success, fame, money, or influence. But real transformation always starts within. God does not rebuild your life in front of a crowd. He rebuilds it behind closed doors in moments where nobody is watching, when it's just you, your doubts, and your faith. Silence is God's workshop because it strips away the unnecessary and exposes what truly matters. It's the moment when your words stop and his words begin. It's the place where your human reasoning ends and his divine order takes over. When you choose silence, you are choosing surrender. You are saying, God, I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to prove myself. I don't need to be understood by everyone. I just need to be transformed by you. And that kind of surrender is rare. We often want to explain our pain, justify our failures, or argue our worth. But silence teaches you to let God do the talking through your actions, your peace, and your endurance. When you stay silent, you are not being weak. You are being wise. You are allowing heaven to handle what your words cannot fix. In silence, God rebuilds your heart first, because your heart is the center of everything. It's the place where dreams are born, where faith grows, and where wounds hide. And sometimes God has to take you into silence to clean what's been corrupted. He'll take you out of conversations that feed insecurity. He'll separate you from people who keep you distracted. He'll close certain doors, not because he's punishing you, but because he's preparing you. Silence is his way of sanctifying your heart. It's his process of removing bitterness, pride, and fear so that his love can dwell freely within you. You'll notice something about every person God used greatly. He isolated them before he elevated them. Moses had 40 years in the desert. Joseph had years in prison. David had time alone tending sheep. Even Jesus spent time in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. The silence wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God was rebuilding them from the inside out. He was shaping their identity, their patience, their humility, and their obedience. That's what silence does. It develops strength that can't be seen but can be felt. It builds the kind of faith that doesn't need attention to stay alive. When you stay silent, God also rebuilds your mind. He replaces anxiety with assurance. He clears out the clutter of fear and fills you with divine clarity. You begin to see things differently. What used to offend you no longer matters. What used to drain you no longer holds power over you. Silence renews your mental space so that you can think like him. Sometimes the reason you can't hear God is because there's too much noise inside your head, too many opinions, too many doubts, too many distractions. But when you step back, unplug, and sit still, you realize that his voice was never gone. It was just drowned out by the noise. Silence is where discernment grows. It's where God sharpens your spiritual senses. It's in silence that you begin to recognize what is for you and what is not. You start to understand when to speak and when to hold your peace. You start to see the difference between God's timing and your impatience. In silence, you learn that every delay is not denial. Sometimes it's divine protection. You learn that being unseen doesn't mean being forgotten. It means being developed. There's something powerful about knowing that you don't have to announce everything God is doing in you. Some of your greatest growth will happen in seasons nobody applauds. The world measures success by visibility, but God measures it by stability. You might not be seen, but you are being strengthened. You might feel hidden, but you are being healed. Every time you choose to stay silent instead of reacting, you are being rebuilt. Every time you choose to pray instead of argue, you are giving God room to move. Every time you choose stillness over striving, heaven starts shifting things in your favor. Silence also tests your trust. Can you trust God when you don't hear anything? Can you stay faithful when heaven feels quiet? Those are the moments that build unshakable faith, because silence forces you to believe without proof, to hold on without explanation, to move forward without confirmation. That's where real faith is forged, not when you hear God every day, but when you don't, and still choose to believe He's working. Silence teaches you to trust His process even when you can't trace His plan. In the workshop of silence, God rebuilds your character. He refines your integrity. He stretches your patience. He exposes the parts of you that you've hidden behind words. Sometimes the reason God brings silence is because your character needs to catch up with your calling. You might be gifted enough to handle the spotlight, but if your character isn't solid, that same light will expose your cracks. Silence gives God time to seal those cracks, the insecurities, the pride, the anger, the fear, so that when He elevates you, you can handle the weight of your assignment. You see, silence isn't punishment. It's a promotion in disguise. When God goes quiet, it's not because He's absent, it's because He's active. He's moving pieces you can't see. He's aligning opportunities you're not yet ready for. He's protecting you from distractions that look like blessings. Silence is not God's rejection, it's His redirection. He's rebuilding your foundation so that what comes next doesn't collapse. Because sometimes you pray for elevation, but God knows your structure can't handle it yet. So He brings silence so He can strengthen your roots before He adds the weight of fruit. The silent season is often the most misunderstood. People may think you're falling off, but in truth, you're being built up. They may think you've lost passion, but you're actually gaining wisdom. They may think you've gone missing, but you're actually being remade. God hides you because He values you. He puts His greatest work in silence because it's too precious to be exposed too early. That's why diamonds are formed underground, seeds grow beneath the soil, and babies develop in the womb, all in silence. Creation itself honors the power of quiet development. When you embrace silence, you begin to understand that you don't need validation to know your worth. You don't need applause to confirm your progress. You start to become grounded in God's voice rather than people's opinions, and that is freedom. Because once your peace is rooted in His presence, the noise around you loses its grip. You'll find yourself walking through storms with calmness that confuses people. That's what happens when you've been rebuilt from the inside out. Nothing external can shake what's internal. Silence also births revelation. It's in those quiet moments that ideas come, clarity flows, and creativity awakens. When your mind is calm, the Holy Spirit can download divine strategy into your spirit. That's why sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to figure it out and just be still. Because silence is not inactivity, it's divine productivity. God does more in your stillness than you could ever do in your striving. So if you're in a silent season right now, if God feels distant, if doors aren't opening, if people have walked away, don't panic. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. God is working in unseen places, building something stronger than before. He's not ignoring you, He's investing in you. Every silent moment is a seed for something greater. Every pause is part of His process. When the rebuilding is complete, you won't need to announce it. People will see it. Your peace will speak for itself. Your growth will make noise louder than your words ever could. Because when God rebuilds you from the inside out, He gives you a new strength, a new clarity, a new confidence. You won't have to chase validation. It will recognize you. You won't have to force blessings. They'll flow naturally because you're now aligned with His timing, not your impatience. So stay silent and stay surrendered. Let God do the work that only He can do. Trust that the silence is not wasted. It's working. Every quiet moment is molding your future. Every delay is shaping your destiny. And one day, when the time is right, God will reveal what He was building in the dark. The version of you that emerges will be stronger, wiser, and more anchored than ever before. Silence is not your enemy, it's your environment for elevation. It's the place where God removes the old and restores the original version of you, the one He designed before pain, doubt, and fear got in the way. When you stay silent, you give Him full access to your soul. You allow Him to heal, rebuild, and renew from the inside out. And when that process is complete, you won't just survive life, you'll shine through it, carrying the peace that only comes from being rebuilt by God himself. Because when you stay silent, God doesn't just change your circumstances, he changes you. And when you are transformed, everything around you begins to shift. Silence is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your rebuilding. God never begins his work on the surface. When he decides to change your life, he doesn't start with your circumstances. He starts with your spirit. He begins with what people can't see, because true transformation, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from what's visible, it comes from what's internal. You can dress differently, speak differently, even move into a new environment, but if your heart hasn't been renewed, you'll eventually end up in the same cycles. God rebuilds from the inside before he reveals on the outside, because he knows that the foundation of your destiny is your inner world, your faith, your patience, your integrity, your mindset. When God begins to rebuild you, he often starts by breaking down what was built without him. Sometimes he allows the walls you trusted to collapse so he can show you that your strength never came from the structure, it came from his spirit. The breaking isn't to destroy you, it's to free you. God dismantles the false layers, the pride, the fear, the dependence on approval, so he can reconstruct something real, something eternal. And this process is never visible at first. It happens quietly, slowly, within. The same way seeds grow underground before anyone ever sees the plant, God grows his purpose inside you long before it ever becomes public. That's why your hidden seasons are so important. Those are the times when you feel unseen, unrecognized, overlooked, or forgotten. But in reality, that's when heaven is most active. You may not see movement, but God is setting foundations that will hold the weight of your calling. When he's rebuilding your inner world, it can feel like nothing's happening, but it's actually the most productive season of your life. The silence, the waiting, the stillness, all of it is sacred ground where your character is being formed. We often want God to fix our circumstances, the job, the relationship, the opportunity. But God is more interested in fixing what those things exposed inside us, the impatience, the fear, the insecurity. Because if he changes your situation before he changes your soul, the blessing will break you. You won't be ready to sustain what he gives. That's why some doors stay closed for now, not because God is cruel, but because he's kind. He knows that external success without internal stability is a setup for collapse. So he rebuilds you from the inside first. He strengthens your identity before he expands your influence. When God begins this inner work, it's rarely comfortable. It can feel like your world is falling apart when in truth, it's falling into alignment. You might feel distant from him, but he's closer than ever, working beneath the surface. He touches places no one else can reach. Your motives, your thoughts, your desires, your reactions. He starts reconstructing your faith by allowing you to walk through seasons that require it. You'll pray for patience and he'll send delay. You'll ask for strength and he'll give you situations that test your limits. You'll ask for peace and he'll let storms rise until you learn that peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust. That's how he rebuilds. The inner work of God is not glamorous. There are no spotlights in this season. Nobody claps for you when you choose forgiveness over revenge, when you stay humble instead of proud, when you keep believing even after disappointment. But those are the moments heaven celebrates. Because God is crafting something eternal within you, the kind of faith that can't be shaken by circumstance, the kind of patience that doesn't collapse under pressure, the kind of love that doesn't depend on being loved back. That's what it means to be rebuilt from the inside out. When God rebuilds, he rewrites your spiritual DNA. He takes what pain corrupted and rewires it into purpose. The same rejection that once made you bitter becomes the reason you now understand compassion. The same failure that once embarrassed you becomes the wisdom that fuels your leadership. God wastes nothing. Every broken piece of your past becomes material in his hands. He's a master builder. He doesn't throw away the ruins. He rebuilds them into something unrecognizable. But for that to happen, you must let him work where no one else can, deep inside. You may wonder why God hides you, why your prayers seem unanswered, why your progress feels invisible, but the truth is God hides what he's healing. When a surgeon operates, he doesn't do it in front of an audience. He closes the door, creates a sterile environment, and works in silence. God does the same with your soul. He removes you from certain relationships. He quiets certain environments. He even limits your visibility, not because you're unworthy, but because you're under construction. If people saw the process, they might misjudge the purpose. So he keeps you hidden until the rebuilding is complete. And when he finally reveals you, it's always in divine timing, because the outside always follows the inside. Once your spirit is strong enough, God starts aligning the external pieces, the opportunities, the connections, the platforms. What seemed delayed suddenly happens quickly because the inside is caught up with the vision. That's why scripture says, do not despise the day of small beginnings. The small hidden days are where your roots go deep enough to support your future. The taller the building, the deeper the foundation must be. God will never elevate you publicly beyond what you can handle privately. It's easy to get impatient in the rebuilding season. You might look at others and wonder why their lives seem to be moving faster. But what you don't see is the depth of what God is doing in you. You're not behind. You're being built differently. You're not delayed. You're being developed. God's timeline is not human. He's not just preparing a blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. He's refining your responses, strengthening your faith, and enlarging your capacity to carry what he's about to trust you with. The inside work also changes how you see yourself. When God rebuilds your inner world, he heals the identity you didn't even know was broken. He teaches you that your worth was never tied to what you achieve, but to who you are in him. He breaks the need to perform for love and replaces it with the assurance that you already have his approval. That kind of inner healing produces peace that external validation can't compete with. You stop needing everyone to understand you because you finally understand yourself through his perspective. When God finishes this phase of rebuilding, you will notice that external changes come effortlessly. You'll see breakthroughs you didn't have to chase. You'll walk into rooms you didn't have to beg to enter. Because when your inner world aligns with God's will, your outer world begins to reflect his order. Favor follows alignment. That's why so many people strive for success but still feel empty. They've built the outside while ignoring the inside, but you can't build a palace on a cracked foundation. God wants to make sure your internal structure can sustain the weight of where he's taking you. In this process, patience becomes your greatest ally. You can't rush rebuilding. You can't force divine timing. You have to let the process do its perfect work. Some of the best things God will ever give you take time because he's not just preparing the promise, he's perfecting the person who will receive it. Every time you choose faith over frustration, you're reinforcing the structure he's building in you. Every time you choose prayer over panic, you're strengthening the foundation. Every time you choose gratitude over grumbling, you're adding stability to your soul. There's something beautiful about realizing that God is not in a hurry. He's eternal. He sees the end from the beginning. He's not anxious about your timeline. While you worry about what's next, he's working on what's necessary. Because when you're rebuilt internally, you'll never have to fear collapse externally. The peace he gives you inside becomes a fortress that no storm can shake. The faith he builds in you becomes armor that no attack can penetrate. That's the kind of strength that can't be taken away. Because it wasn't given by circumstances, it was given by God. If you're in a season right now where everything feels quiet, confusing, or slow, remember, God is not ignoring you. He's investing in you. He's working on your roots. You might not see results, but he's deepening your foundation so you can rise higher without falling later. Don't mistake divine preparation for divine punishment. Don't confuse silence with absence. When nothing seems to be happening, that's often when the most important things are taking place. God is rebuilding you from the inside, layer by layer, thought by thought, prayer by prayer. And when he finally reveals what he's been building, it will make sense. You'll look back and realize why certain things didn't work, why certain people left, why certain doors closed. It wasn't rejection, it was reconstruction. God was protecting what he was perfecting. He was making sure the new version of you would never settle for what the old version tolerated. When the unveiling comes, it won't just be about your success. It will be about your stability, your maturity, your peace. When God rebuilds you from the inside, he gives you new eyes to see life differently. You begin to value peace more than attention, purpose more than popularity, depth more than display. You no longer chase validation because you carry revelation, the understanding that everything outward flows from within. You become a vessel that reflects his glory, not your own striving. And that's when the outer blessings begin to chase you, because your spirit has become a magnet for divine favor. So don't resist the inner rebuilding. Don't run from the quiet seasons. Don't despise the slow process. This is where your real strength is formed. God is not just changing your circumstances, he's changing you so that your circumstances will never control you again. He's rewriting your spiritual DNA to match your destiny. And when the time comes, the version of you that steps into the spotlight will be unshakable, unbreakable, and undeniable. Not because of what's on you, but because of what's in you. God rebuilds from the inside before he reveals on the outside. So stay patient, stay surrendered, stay faithful in the unseen, because one day soon the world will witness what heaven has been working on in secret. And when they do, they'll see the evidence of a God who doesn't just rebuild lives, he restores souls, renews hearts, and reveals his glory through those who allowed him to work from the inside out.